appreciate you. And for those who are new on our call, please put new on the chat, and we wanted to welcome you all.
Tell them where the chat is. How do they get to that?
Hi, Marnie, welcome. Audra, welcome. Jonathan, welcome. Rick, thank you guys for tuning in. Hello, Thomas, welcome. Steve, hello. Hi, Brad. Hi, Patrick. Hello, Tani. Larry, thank you so much. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for showing up. Guys, I have a win to share to all of you. Yesterday marks my second working anniversary with Highland Park, and woo, woo. Yeah, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Jan and Sherman for always guiding me and believing in me in all that I do for the betterment of the company and our services. I'm very grateful to both of you. Thank you so much. And also to my team members who are always by my side, supporting me and helping me. It's my privilege to be working and growing with you guys. Thank you. And also to all our customers, thank you for always inspiring us to strive to deliver the best service. All the hard work that we do it for all of you. So it's an honor to be working with you all. Thank you so much. Again, this is the place where we share our knowledge, ask our questions, and get tips and tricks all about the lapidary art. And tonight, we have a very special guest. She will be discussing the process of silversmithing. She is the owner of Mountain Girl Silver and Mountain Girl Cabs. For sure, this will be another interactive and informative session. And for our Q&A later, you can raise your hand if you have any question by going into the reaction icon at the bottom of your Zoom and click raise hand, or you can also post your questions on the chat. So everybody get ready as we kick off our 10th Highland Park live interactive webinar with our intro video.
Hey there. We are thrilled to have you here, Erika, and we're thrilled to have all of you that have joined us. I see a lot of familiar names here, so welcome tonight. This is going to be packed with information, so we're super stoked here. John is waking up there over in China.
I listened to that intro music, and I'm like, I feel out of sync because I haven't had any coffee yet. It's kind of a shock.
For coffee.
Yeah, yep. It's 7 a.m. here.
Ouch.
All right. Well, why don't we kind of set the backstage, John? I know you and Erika.
Well, actually, I have a question. I have a question for everybody that's on the call so far. How many people on the call have done silversmithing before? If you have, just put yes in the chat.
Oh yeah, they're coming in. Some no's, some yeses.
Great.
All right. Yeah, Leslie's done lots of it.
Well, I hope this isn't boring for those of you who have done silversmithing.
Well, let's also ask a question. Who would like to, who has not done silversmithing but really wants to learn how to be successful at it? Put what's the saying?
Tawny.
Put
There we
put
go.
new in it. Put new. Yeah, we got some newbies. That's great.
New.
Kelly.
All right.
Nice.
So one of the things a lot of you would ask about silversmithing, because people are making cabs and they want to say, well, how do I set this thing? We talked to Erika, and Erika does some really cool work, and we thought it'd be great to get her on board here and kind of talk through the whole steps of how she does that. And we've created a lot of video content on this as well. We got a lot of content. So there's a lot of material that we're going to be able to share with you, which we really are aiming to help you demystify what it takes to do silversmithing, and also simplify it, because sometimes people think, oh God, it's too many tools, it's going to cost me too much. And one of the things that we want to do is really get it boiled down so you know really what are the essential things that are necessary for you to get started. So we'll be covering that.
Nice. Lots
Danny
of
went to
videos.
school. All right. So where do we want to go to on this? You want to talk a little bit about the background with how we
let's actually start with that intro video, because that has a lot of great information in it, and then there may be some questions that come out of that, and that will get us started.
All right. So we're going to share my screen here. And can you see the shared screen?
Yep.
All right.
Hello, everybody. I'm Erika. And what we're going to do in this series, it's probably going to go over the course of a couple weeks, depending on how fast we can get this done. But I just would like to show you guys the process and the tools that I use to make a simple, clean, split shank ring. And I'm not going to make it super busy, not going to have a whole lot of embellishments on it, because those are the types of things that as you get further and further into silversmithing, that's where your style comes in. And one of the things that when I first started, I thought to myself, gosh, I don't even have a style. I'm just going to be soldering stuff to stuff and making basic stuff. And that's okay. That's where you have to start. You don't really learn your style per se, or the thing that trips your trigger, that you're making a piece and it's like, wow, that's really cool. You don't learn those things right at the beginning. Those types of insight and creative artist eye, that comes down the line. When you're first starting out, you're literally learning how to use cutters and rawhide mallets and little torches, and you're just learning the basics of how to get things done from point A to point B. All the fancy stuff and stamping and all embellishment and twisting your own wire, that all will come later, I promise. So for this series, we're just going to focus on making a bezel, getting it on a back plate, getting the back plate on a ring shank. So I hope it helps you a little bit with confidence, because even though a lot of people, they get scared about silversmithing, which is, I get it, because I felt the same way, and I felt like when I started, I had a bazillion questions and no one to ask them. And nothing brings me more joy, like on my Instagram account, than to help people getting into this craft. And I think the reason why, and the same with Lapidary too, I love helping people get into Lapidary, because my life is so fulfilling. I wake up every morning and I'm like, boom, what am I going to make today? I get to make something today, from out of nothing to something. And it's the greatest feeling, and I make a good living at it, and I wish everybody could do the same. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I want to share what I know. I'm not the greatest silversmith out there. There's silversmiths out there that are way more talented than me with their skills and their, you know, just they've been doing it a lot longer. And, you know, I still feel like I have information to share. So let's get started. And one thing I like to do is make hand cut castellated bezels, but I'm just gonna go simple for this project so that it doesn't look too daunting for people who are wanting to get into silversmithing. You can buy pre-made bezel wire in several different gauges. Gauges is the thickness and height. You can buy several different sizes for several different stones. Personally, I only always buy one size, one gauge, and I choose to file it or cut it to fit my stone. So I'll show you. Please excuse the mess, because a jeweler's bench is never very clean. Okay, so for tonight, what we're going to be making tonight, the ring, we're going to be making the bezel, the back plate, and the ring shank. And for those three things, you need a jeweler's saw, you need some sort of file. I use beeswax for lube for my saw blade. I'm using 24 gauge 3/16 fine bezel wire, a piece of 24 gauge sterling silver sheet, some flat wire for the ring shank, a pair of flat head or a pair of flat pliers, a pair of flush cutters, a rawhide mallet, a ring mandrel, and you can use a small little torch like this. We can talk torches later. And then a bench pin is nice to have. I didn't have one when I first started. I hung my pieces of silver off the side of my desk and cut it that way. It was ridiculous, but it worked. You can get some pretty nice bench pins for pretty cheap if you search. This one I like because it has the hole already for the ring mandrel, so that when you go to hammer your oh yeah, always have a fire extinguisher. But when you go to hammer your ring shank, I mean, this thing takes the brunt. So these are the tools that I'll be using tonight. And of course, my pickle pot. So today I've decided that we are going to set this beautiful Colina Verde Veracite. It's mined by my buddy Ryan out of Tonopah, Nevada. It's just one of those Veracites that can be so vastly different from dig to dig. So we're gonna make this big whopper of a ring. We're gonna make it simple, but we're gonna make it badass. First, I like to put a upside down painter's tape. I make 2 strips of painter's tape, and then I flip them upside down and I tape them down on my bench so that I have a nice sticky surface for my stone.
All right. So let's I'm going to jump out of here, go back to the introduction. So you talked about tools right there, kind of the layout. This is a good place to kind of get some questions in, because a lot of times people think that there's a ton of tools that are necessary for silversmithing.
Yeah, but first I just want to say, if I don't know if it's just me, but the video is really glitchy for me. So I don't know if it's glitchy for everybody else, but yeah, but it's, you get the gist of it. I'm just kind of
yeah, we'll have them posted up on YouTube, because what it may be is the transmission of it over the internet.
I'm wondering if it's because it's being recorded.
No, it's generally it's from a video compression. If there's a lot of movement, it's harder to push that. If you're very still and you don't move a whole lot, the compression works better. So it could be like, I noticed that when you probably have more hand motions than that actually is more pixels. So it actually eats up more bandwidth.
Gotcha.
And that's one of the things that we're learning as we do these things, like move a little bit less, because that's less change, because then it can stream it a little bit better.
Gotcha. Oh, it says also.
And Lisa also is right. Like if you kick off your video and when you're watching this, you are going to have more bandwidth at your home connection. So, you can momentarily turn your camera off. So when we stream the next thing, stop your video, and then you may find you're going to have more bandwidth and it's going to stream a little bit smoother.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, where were we?
We were just talking about the tools to getting started. So you gave kind of a basic layout of tools there. What does that typically cost? If you think about like just getting started with those tools, what would be somebody to look at? Not like the super fancy, but just the basics you laid out there.
If you go basic, and I mean, we're talking basic like I went basic. I think you can get away with starting, and I mean, I'm not talking fancy. You can't have the fancy files and the fancy stuff, but you can get everything you need for under $200.
Yeah.
Now that's not also including the silver. I mean, silver is high right now, the cost of silver and all that, but I'm just talking tools.
Yeah. So this very low barrier to entry for somebody to get started with us.
Totally. Yep. You don't need a lot. You can start with I was talking to somebody yesterday. Instead of having a solder pan, a solder block, I would take my pieces out to my front patio and do it on the concrete. I mean, you can make do with a lot of what you've got laying around.
Right.
All
Was there
right.
any
So,
questions? Someone was asking, what is a good gauge for the Bezel wire? And I think that you had.
Yeah, for my bezel wire, it kind of depends on what kind of stone you're setting. This one is a relatively big stone that I'm setting, so I ran with my 24 gauge. I always like using 24 gauge by 3/16 of an inch. So, and that's how I cut my stones. I like cutting my stones that height. That's what I like to use. You can buy pre-made bezel wire in just about every height, every thickness. And it's just a matter of finding which one works that you like working with. This is a good place to start because it's thick enough and forgiving enough that if you gouge it with your bezel pusher, you can maybe fix it. It's thick enough that it's a little more forgiving than say, 28 gauge.
Yeah, here's a couple questions under here. So Leslie was saying bezel wire comes in a standard gauge. It is too thin for most people.
Yeah, I mean, the fine bezel wire that is already pre-made, and you also have to, like when I'm making my castellated bezels for my bigger stones, I use 20 gauge sterling. I don't even use fine silver because fine silver is a lot softer than sterling silver. So you're going to eat through that bezel wire if you go burnishing it, really hard with your burnishing tools and your bezel pushers. You're going to end up, going right through it if you go too thin. So that's why I like to start a little thicker.
Right. And I think Susan was saying, are you using 0.9995 fine silver or 0.925 sterling? And I think you were just talking to that.
Yeah, for my bezel wire, for this stuff, the pre-made stuff, it's fine silver, the 0.999. And fine silver is a lot softer, a lot more malleable. You can damage it a lot quicker and it's not as hardy, but it's easier to work with.
Yep. Somebody was asking where to buy silver supplies. I saw you were using material from Rio Grande. Stuhler, of course, is another supplier of that.
Yep, Stuhler.
Probably Kingsley North. I think they may sell some of that. I'm not sure. But I mean, I think the two bigger names are like Rio and Stuhler.
Yeah. Yep. That's where I get most of my stuff. I mean, some of my findings I get through Seattle Findings. I used to get my wire through a mom and pop out of Missouri, but when COVID hit, they closed their doors. So I'm now rolling my own because I got a rolling mill now.
All right. That's good. Well, maybe we can learn from that as well. All right. So do we want to move to the next one about moving and wrapping the bezel in the stone, where you'll talk through the steps of this?
You talking to me?
Yeah. You ready for the next video?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and I encourage people, like, if you're getting choppy, just turn off your video. Just stop video on the lower left-hand side and see if that improves the video quality for you.
So the first thing I like to do is I just have a tendency to always put my bezel seam on the right side. I don't know if it's habitual or what. But you just take your bezel wire and you hold it. And that's why it's so awesome to have sticky tape on your bench, because it helps you fold that. It keeps a firm grip on that stone while you're moving that bezel wire around. And a Sharpie. Always have a Sharpie. Some people use a little marker, like a little scriber. I just like to make a little mark where I need to cut it. So once you have your little mark, I just take a pair of flush cutters. I take a pair of little flush cutters, and I always cut from the inside, so it's more of a flat cut. Try to get it as straight up and down as you can. And then I take a pair of flat pliers and I squeeze that baby down there like that. It's a little gappy, but that's okay, because we're gonna file these nice and flat now. I don't like using super harsh files on my bezel wire, because this is fine silver, and fine silver is a lot softer than sterling. So just one little pass of a file is plenty to get all that bird metal off. You start filing it too much and you're gonna end up with a curved bezel, and you don't want that. You want it nice and straight. So now that I have it pretty straight, and this can be the most frustrating part of making a bezel, is because you have to kind of get it, you kind of have to maneuver it this way and that way to get it so that it rests perfectly. And I also like using my flat pliers for this too. Once I get it kind of perfect, then I take my flat plier and I just give it a little squeeze, just a little squeeze, so it, and then you just kind of manipulate it and move it until you're comfortable with how straight it is, and then you throw it in your pickle. So many people use different things for their pickle. Some people like using citric acid. Some people use vinegar, and they make their own out of vinegar, and I think it's, I don't want to misname what people use. Some people use Sparex that they buy through supply companies. Personally, my favorite pickle ever is the pH down Clorox brand that you buy at the pool supply store, or you can even get it at the hardware store. Well, I'll show you. This is my favorite pickle, pH down. You put about maybe like 1/8 of a cup in your little teeny tiny pickle pot, and you fill it with water. And basically what pickle does is it makes your metal clean. If you go to solder dirty silver that's got finger oils on it and whatever else that it picked up when you were working on it, you're gonna have a harder time soldering. Metal has to be clean before you solder it, because sometimes when I am smithing here and I just can't get my solder to flow, 9 times out of 10 it's because my pickle's filthy and I just need a new batch of pickle. There's all sorts of different kinds of flux you can use. And what flux is the chemical that makes the solder flow, and wherever there's flux, that's where your solder is going to flow onto your metal. I've used all of them. Honestly, my favorite one is the one you get from Ace Hardware called Handy Flux. I swear by this stuff. I've always used it. It's messy, as you can clearly see. I do like Fire Scoff for when I'm already heating a piece and I feel like, oh, that needs just a little bit more. I'll just make one little squirt. This stuff from Pepe Tools, this Smart Flux, it comes in this, you know, like the power sprayer. I think this stuff is good at preventing fire stain, which is a problem that you don't even need to really worry about as a beginning smith right out of the gate. You can email me and I'll tell you all about it. But this stuff is good for preventing fire stain, and I'll show you how I use it. But I don't like it for flux. I will choose Ghetto Ace brand Handy Flux any day of the week. You really got to make sure that you're really happy with your seam, because if your seam is crappy when you go to set your stone, you're gonna wish you would have taken a little more time to make it really solid. When I first started smithing, I think I used just all easy solder, all easy, the tubey kind, the paste. And while that was easy, sometimes I'd find that my ring joints would pop off, and I like to start with hard solder for bringing my bezel together, because then when you go to solder the bezel down onto the back plate, that's when I use medium, so that it doesn't have to get as hot, and so it won't melt the hard solder. And then I use easy solder when I put my whole back plate and bezel onto my ring shank. I use easy so it doesn't have to get as hot as it did when I was using the medium and the hard. Because if you keep getting your piece to the same temperature, all your joint, and you use the same strength of solder, you're gonna keep compromising the one that you just did before. So it's better to use different solder strengths. Does that make sense? All right, let's see how much damage, how much work I'm gonna have to do on this sucker. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. I feel like my stone is the perfect height to this bezel, which I cut this stone, so I try to cut my stones at the same height as I do with the bezel wire I use. Sometimes I have to sand off the bottom of stones to make them, you know, to make them the right height. So even though this bezel turned out pretty good, see all that extra solder, and it's kind of bumpy on this side, and it's not perfectly flush on this side, it's got its little things that need to be fixed. So I purchased this small little belt sander, which it's been a godsend, but you don't necessarily have to use something like this. You can do just as much. I haven't had this thing very long. You can do just as much fixing with just regular sandpaper to fix your bezel, to make it all nice and flat. And one way to do that is you want to put it on a flat surface, and you take your hand and you do a figure 8 so that you hit the bottom of the bezel evenly. Figure 8, because if you just go back and forth, you're going to eat up a lot of this side and a lot of this side. But if you do a figure 8, you're working every single angle of that bezel. And then flip it over. You want the bottom part of your bezel to be perfectly flat. Otherwise, when you go to solder it onto your back plate, it's going to be all... Also, I've had so many people see my videos on Instagram and they say, what's that stuff that you're putting on your fingers? This is called Guard-Tex medical grade alligator tape. I like buying the medical grade. You can buy some really cheap, crappy alligator tape out there. But just spend the extra couple bucks and get the medical grade. Because what it does is it really saves your fingers from potential cuts, burns. When you're running silicone wheels, you're not putting holes in your fingers. Also, it's pretty grippy. I'd love to be able to use it on my thumbs, but I need my thumbs to feel, whereas these two fingers, these are more of my grippy fingers. So this stuff will save your life. Peace. So I feel like I've got my bezel pretty even. I'm trying to zoom in here. I like where the lip is at the top of the stone. You can make your bezels higher. You know, some people like to have their bezels a little bit higher on their stone so that they have more to fold over. And that's a silversmith's preference, really. I just like to have mine relatively close because I like, well, it just depends on the design. Again, it just depends on the design. All right, now that I got that all done, now it's time to make the back plate. My bezel is nice and smooth on the bottom, nice and even.
All right. Okay, and I saw there's a bunch of questions coming in here as we were rolling through here. So one of the questions, and some of these you may be answered, and I didn't see because I know, Erika, you're responding quickly. Somebody was asking, Tani was asking, what was the wire for the ring shank? And I think you may be covering the ring shank later.
Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do the ring shank. I don't know when we'll get to it, but yeah, I hit on that really good.
It'll come. So Tani, that question will definitely be answered. Cornelia, who's asking lots of questions, super engaged. Can you talk a little bit about fire scale? I don't understand why pickle won't just clean it up.
Yeah, fire stain is literally the bane of every silversmith's existence. And there's so many products out there that people push that, oh, it'll prevent fire stain, and just dunk it in acetone with boric acid and make a barrier and before you solder. And I've tried everything I've tried, and I still get fire stain. It's just one of those things that you have to kind of just deal with, and you have to learn how to get rid of it. And I actually go over that. I think we'll hit on that next week. I finally have found the one bit that eats through fire stain like quick. So yeah, we'll hit on that. Fire stain is just sometimes you can get the lighter fire stain will come off in some good pickle.
Yep.
But I've never had luck with it.
So I just want to, as we're following here, like for the folks that are new, just some responses in the thing, like, yes, if this is like starting to give you kind of some steps on how to break down this process, I want to make sure that we're kind of connecting and giving you like, okay, I can see a Bezel wire. Because I have not done silversmithing, so I want to see, like, is this connecting for other for you out there and you're watching this and saying, well, I can do that. Just put yes in the comments. Yeah, Ira's like, yeah, I can do it.
Will
There
a
we
later
go.
video go over using flux? And
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, part of
I
what
do that when I do cover a lot of about flux and all that and soldering when I do the back plate, when I do the bezel on the back plate.
now, one of the things that you said was really interesting when I first watched that video is you talked about the different grades of solder. So the medium, to me, that was totally new stuff because I'm not trained as a silversmith. I know the lapidary side of it, but I don't know the silversmithing side. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it made a whole lot of sense to me. But I've seen so many people struggle where they get heat to the piece and then it's coming apart with them in other areas. I've seen that when I've gone to like the lapidary clubs. Can you talk a little bit more to that and like, what people should be thinking about? Like, because that's not that expensive to buy the different grades, right?
Nope. And when I first started, like I said, I just used all easy. I thought that was what you do because no one told me any different. In fact, when I saw in the catalogs that they had hard and medium, I was like, well, why do you need that? I had no idea. But as I started smithing and learning that my ring shank was, when I would go to do my ring shank on the back of my bezel or on the back of my back plate and my bezel was popping open, it's like, okay, that's why you need hard solder on that first joint. You need to use hard solder at the beginning so that when you continue to heat up your piece and you're adding elements and more elements, you can start going down you can start it hard and go down to easy because you don't have to get your piece as hot
Right.
the farther into it that you go. But that's not something that a beginner really thinks about, you know what I mean? So that's why I wish someone would have told me, Erika, use hard solder for your bezel, use medium for your back, from your bezel to your back plate, and then use easy to go onto your shank, because it will save you so much headache, heartache, and money.
Yeah, I mean, that alone.
And unhappy customers too. Like even when I first started, my ring shank popped off. Well, okay, yeah, well.
Well, I mean, this whole thing, this really gets to the core of what we really want to have you people, when they get into silversmithing, they really can have success early. Like if you can have somebody's success be easy, their confidence goes way up. And when their confidence goes up, they'll move forward and they'll not drop out. Like that's part of why we're doing this whole webinar series, is to give you the information so that you can confidently tackle these things and really realize the kind of ideas that you have in your mind, the creative things you want to create. So I love that whole piece.
But to interrupt you, learning to silversmith is all about making mistakes. It's all about botching silver and cracking stones and swearing and having to walk away. Because if you give up the first time you get frustrated and you say, I can't do this, then you're really, it's not an easy thing to master, so just go in knowing that and be patient with yourself and know that you're going to screw up a bunch of pieces and you're going to have to scrap them and save your silver. You'll get your money back, so just don't get discouraged. Making mistakes is all part of it.
Yep. So we got a couple of questions here. Let's see. One was a question about how long do you keep it in the pickle? I think you might have answered that. I thought I saw like 45 minutes.
It kind of depends. If I'm just throwing my bezel in before I solder my bezel for the first time, I'll put it in there for, I don't know, a minute, because it doesn't have any fire, stuff on it yet. So it doesn't really need a whole lot of cleaning. But after you fire something and solder something and you throw it in your pickle, I leave my stuff in at least for 3 to 4 minutes. And if I rush it and then I pull it out and I go to solder again and it won't flow, it's like, well, you can't rush things. So 3 to 4, 4 to 5, it just depends. If it's full of a whole bunch of crap on it after you get done, leave it in there for 10 minutes. Just don't leave it in overnight. I've done that before. It eats through your silver.
Yeah. Cornelia was asking, how long does it take to feel confident as a silversmith? I'm trying to understand how much in silver I'm going to blow. That's a great question. Like, and how long have you been a silversmith? Like, because you have had a journey to get here, and you came from silversmithing into lapidary, which I think you and I talked about offline. A lot of silversmiths are like, I want to learn lapidary because I want to have the stone that I can set the way that I can see it in my mind.
Right. And cut them in the shapes I want. But, you know, that's the beauty about working with metals. Like someone on here is saying, you know, you blow through silver, you will always get your money back if you refine it. Fine, you're not going to get 100%, but, or, you know, down the road, you can melt it down and get a rolling mill and roll it through yourself. You know, you metals are, like someone said, infinitely usable. So yeah, I mean, you might luck out, you might not screw up something, you know, it's, I don't know. That's kind of a loaded question, how much silver you're going to blow through.
Well, I mean, part of the thing we're trying to do here by having you here and making you available to other people, hopefully, you know, I'm seeing from comments that we're going to take some of the mistakes away. Because if you can learn from somebody else's mistakes, that's a lot better than learning from your own. Like if you can be on the phone here and Eric's like, don't do this, do that, that speeds your process up as opposed to just flailing at it and taking the long path. And that's part of what we try to do with these webinars is give you as much information so you can avoid those mistakes by talking to somebody who is an expert who's already been down that path and give you the shortcut.
Who's already learned every single lesson from mistake.
Right.
How long have you been a silversmith?
Well, I've been working metals since 06, but I didn't really get into like the, you know, the bigger aspect of it until, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. And then got the urge to start cutting stones. And then now it's a struggle figuring out what I want to do every day.
Yeah.
I'm curious of the people that are on the webinar right now, how many of you that are already doing silversmithing would love to be able to make your own stones?
Me?
Yeah. Courtney's like, I do.
Courtney has the CB8. She just needs to plug the damn thing in. Good, you already make your own. Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I already do, but I still buy cabochons. Yeah, I still buy some sometimes. If it's like a smack piece, I'll get it. But Shayla, yep. I'm a lapidary desiring silversmith skills.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yep. Nice.
Well,
I know Joan does.
Should we move to the next video?
I've got this is going the back plate. This is about getting the back plate. All right,
Larry.
I'll go share my screen and let's start.
Now, picking what gauge of silver to use for your back plate is nothing I really thought about when I was first starting smithing. It wasn't until it's the longer you smith, or like when you first start smithing, you have all these questions and you think your questions are so stupid. But they're not stupid. No question is stupid when you're first starting out doing something that has all these components and chemicals and bits and what bit do I use first and how do you know which one to use first, and a lot of that stuff comes with just doing it the wrong way and learning from your mistakes and then eventually doing it the right way, and then the light bulb goes off and you're like, aha. So when it comes to picking what gauge thickness you use, so like if I'm gonna cut the back side of a pendant out, if it's an open back pendant or like a lot of the live edge Tiffany's that I've made lately, I'll go 20 gauge because I want it thick. I want to be able to saw through that back plate, the design, whatever I'm doing, or even if I'm stamping the back plate. I want it to be nice and thick. If you go using 26 gauge on a ring that has a, you know, a bezel, a little edge along the stone, and you're using 26 gauge silver, that person's probably going to cut their face because that silver's so thin. You can sometimes get away with using thinner gauge silver if it's just a clean bezel with no embellishments on the outside. But the more space around the outside of the stone that you use with stuff, it might, you know, whether it's balls or wire or whatever you decide to do, you want it to have enough strength to hold that stuff up. You don't want it getting caught in a doorway and, you know, have it bend and break. But my jewelry is kind of known for being sturdy, not so much ornate, but more sturdy and longer lasting than ornate and busy. All right, so I'm gonna run with 24 gauge for this, and the reason why is because I'm not gonna be putting a whole bunch of stuff along the outside. It's gonna be a clean, simple ring. So I just take it on my silver here, and I just mark it out where I need to saw it out. Now, if I was gonna be putting wire around it and doing balls and stuff, I'd give it a wider berth. But because it's just a straightforward design, it's just going to be a straightforward cut.
All right. You want me to go to the next video on this?
Yeah, I think that's good.
I think the next video is going to be good as well. Let me pop to that. Here we go. Now
The
share my
24 gauge sheet is 925.
0.925. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Let me share this.
All right, let's talk saws real fast. This is the saw I started out with. The German frame, the simple of the simple. I've tried the Green Lion saw frame, I've tried this German frame, and I hated the Green Lion saw frame. Couldn't cut a straight line to save my life. So I stuck with this one all these years. But then I discovered the new concepts. I don't know if I'm supposed to be plugging brands, but this saw blade or this saw frame is the bomb. It looks like it's super heavy. It's light as a feather. Also, I use beeswax as my saw lube. I use just straight up beeswax. All right, see how my line's kind of wonky, but whatever. Wonky, one of my favorite words. When I first started cutting cabs, oh, and then when you break a blade, it makes me so mad. Anyway, what I was saying is, when I first started cutting cabochons, someone called my cabs wonky. So I love that word. All right, now I got my back plate.
All right, you want to stop here?
There's a couple of questions around the blade type.
Yeah, blade size, blade brands, you know, I've tried all of those too, and I swear by the ones that Rio run, the laser golds. They're the best in my opinion. Some people like to use I think Pepe sells the ones called Nano, as long as they're Swiss, they're probably good. But there's a gauge that you can, or a chart that you can find online that says, you know, I'm sitting here staring right at it. If you're using 20 gauge sheet, you know, it's best, because that's a whole other loaded question, how many teeth you need per the gauge of the silver to make it a nice smooth cut. But there is a chart that you can follow that will help you, you know what size blade to use for what gauge silver. I've found that size 2/0, the 201, not the 2, but the 2, I think they call them aught, right? 2/0. I don't know what it is, but I use it for everything. And fine, I probably snap more than the average, but I don't know. I just like using size 2.
There's a couple of questions that people had here. You want to take a couple questions?
Sure.
So there's one question that Danielle had asked is, she was asking, I think it's that she was asking about the solder, because remember we talked about the medium and the easy, and she says, is easy solder just as strong on your ring shank backplane as medium solder?
It is, because it is. It definitely is. It's because it melts, gets hard. I mean, you're doing everything that the only reason why it's good to go from hard down to easy, like I mean, maybe that's just your question. Is easy strong enough to hold a shank to a back plate? Absolutely. Just as hard would be, but you don't have to get it as hot because it has less nickel in it.
So the melting points are basically different. You know, the melting points are different on them, but the overall strength for jewelry applications is fairly parallel across them.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm making a diamond ring with a big fat diamond in it, I'd probably want to use hard solder over easy solder, you know, just as a cautionary. But for the most part, I mean, easy's just it's metal. I mean, it's metal. If you have a real crappy solder joint, it might pop off. But if it's soldered properly, it's still strong as hard.
So that's hence why the prepping, the flux, all that stuff is such a critical piece there. All right. There was a question also had was Amanda Husband says, the person I've been learning from uses borax, laundry soap, and water for flux. Is this other flux better?
That's another real loaded question. I mean, silversmithing has been done for centuries. So there's so many things and products and things to use for every application, and you just ultimately will find what you like the best. Like, I just really like this handy flux. I like that it gets kind of bubbly, and then I burn off the bubble, and then I place my solder, and it still has enough glassiness that it'll get hot and remelt. I just like the way it behaves. So
certainly for people who are beginning, trying to make your own flux is probably not a great place to put your energy.
Spend $5 and get a bottle of this. It'll last you a year.
JP was asking about pickle pots, and he was saying it sounds expensive. Can it be a crock pot?
Yep, I have one of those little Smoky Joe little crock pots.
Yeah.
And but as you use your crock, and it's one temp. I mean, I just plug the thing in. It doesn't have a hot, low, or medium. It's just one of the little, I think it might even be a potpourri one. I don't know. I got it at the Goodwill. But crock pots will corrode over time. I mean, it's not a piece of equipment or a tool that's going to last forever, because it is corrosive, and the inside of the vessel will get crusty and gross, and you'll need to replace it.
Yeah, there was a question that Bruce had asked, and then also iPad had asked this too. You guys got to put your names on your thing, iPad. What's your favorite solder? Sheet, wire, paste,
So I don't use paste anymore. I used a lot of paste when I was working PMC and all that, but my favorite, I get both. I get wire solder and I get sheet solder to cut little pallions, you know, because they're, so like for instance, when I'm soldering my bezel down onto my back plate, I like using wire solder because I just chop up little pieces of it and tweezer them right in, and they fit right into that little cavity, which is easier, I think, than cutting little pallions and trying to jam them into a, it's like a round peg into a square hole, you know what I mean? So
Right.
I use both. I prefer both. They both have different uses.
Different applications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, because I want to pause this for a second. So a lot of people have commented that the video is a little choppy. Can we throw up the link for subscribing to our YouTube channel, so for the people that want to rewatch the video, that they can access it there? And certainly,
it won't be glitchy on YouTube.
You know, because what we're going to do is we're going to edit the videos directly in.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
we'll cut this. We'll take this thing and we'll cut the video directly into the YouTube before it goes up.
Right on.
Yeah, so we'll actually have the source video, so that should be a little bit smoother. And then we'll figure out how to make the video smoother for next week, where we'll dig into that.
Maybe
so,
I
yeah,
just need to not be so chatty with my hands.
Well, movement is going to be an issue, because the video, the compression is a different issue. You notice on newscasts they don't move around very much, and that was actually from the design, because compression was an issue.
Okay.
Early days. There's a lot more bandwidth now. There's a couple other questions that were here too. Susan was asking what size blade. I think you were answering about the blades in the saw that you're using. I think.
Yeah. If you're gonna go out, if you're gonna buy all the tools to start silversmithing, just do yourself a favor and order the variety pack. They make one that's got them all, the 2 or 0 through 6. Just order it so that you can fart around with all of them and you'll know which ones you need. But I strictly use the 2. I think these are even two aught.
Yeah.
The 2/0.
Yep. And then I've got a couple other questions here. Some of these are pickle jars, mason jars, a pickle pot. You got temperature in there though, right?
You got to keep your pickle has to be warm. So
yeah, so the mason jar is not going to be so great. I mean, no. So I wouldn't. That seems like a bad idea. And you said
here's a fun fact. When I first started, I didn't even know what pickle was. Never even pickled a thing for probably 6 months.
Yeah. So hopefully for those of you that are new, this is going to take some of the difficulty out by knowing, should I need to do a pickle so that I can prep my metal? Bruce was asking, if you take a piece out of the pickle and it's white, do you have to polish it off to silver solder again?
No. Nope. If it's white coming out of the pickle, that means it's really clean.
Yeah.
You still need to treat it as if it's silver. No, you don't need to get that stuff off of there. It's still going to solder. You're good to go. You just flux it, do whatever you're going to do. You don't.
And there was a question around, like, how do you know when your pickle is dirty? Like, how often should you change that?
With this teeny tiny little pot that I've got, the little crock pot, I have to get new pickle probably once every, you have to keep adding water because it evaporates.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get it so diluted, I don't know, I probably make 10 to 15 pieces before I change it out.
And you're just using tap water or using distilled water?
Tap water and a little bit of the pH down.
Okay, so it wouldn't matter if you're like in Texas, it's high limestone. Would that make an impact on that?
I don't think so. Once you add the stuff in it, if you want to really be on the safe side, you could use distilled water, but you're not going to ruin your metal. Your water wherever you live is not going to ruin your metal once you have your pickle solution in there.
I gotcha. All right. And then there's a question from JP. JP says, any comments about using argentium instead of sterling to cut down? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it that.
That's a good question. Yeah,
to cut down on fire scale and oxidation.
That's a really good question. And someone told me, Erika, I know you're struggling with fire stain. Try argentium. Try fine silver. So what would I do? I blew a bunch of money on argentium. And while it does not fire stain as badly, you still get a little bit, but it's not like it is on sterling. You're compromising. I just had a hell of a time soldering with argentium. I don't know what it was. I didn't like it. But you're right. Argentium does not get fire stain the way that sterling does. I just didn't personally like using it because I didn't like its strength. I don't know.
Okay, good. So we got some more questions here. Do we want to go to another video? The next video up is the deciding to stamp, and you talked about stamping.
I think we hold on.
We're right at time. We're at 8.
We're at the hour. Let's try and hit the rest of the questions, and then we'll pick up the videos again next week.
Okay.
Okay.
So then if somebody has a scroll saw, would it work to cut with the right blade?
And I answered him, and I think that if the blades go in there, I mean, the blades are tiny. If they go in there, I don't see why he couldn't use it. I mean, it's probably more bulky than you kind of want it cutting metal, silver, but hey, man, whatever works.
And you said that on that new one that you like, it's really light. That's one of the things that you like about that is a very light compared to that other German one that you have.
And the German one, I think this was $6. I mean, You're not investing a whole ton of money to get a jeweler saw. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see from the time that she spent cutting out the back plate, it's not a huge part of the process to actually saw your piece.
Yeah. And that other saw that you had, what was the brand of that other saw?
This is the new concept saw. It's like I said, I tried the Green Lion one and I hated it. A lot of people love it, but I just couldn't use it. So I got this one, the new concepts. It's so light. And you do actually use your saw. That's a lot of starting silversmiths hate sawing because they bust the blades and they can't saw straight, and then they give up. And that's also one of those hurdles when you're first starting. You just got to get over that. You got to just power through it.
Yep.
Well, I think part of what people do is they push too hard when they're sawing, rather than let the blade cut.
Yeah, they say that you're supposed to pretend that the handle is a hamster, and you don't want to squeeze your hamster to death. You just kind of you really do let the blade do all of the work.
Yeah. One of the questions somebody had was around the torch setup. Like you showed that little mini torch. How much would one of those things cost? That little one that you showed in the setup.
The little mini one. Oh yeah, this one is. I think I paid. I don't know, $15, and then you buy the little cans of butane.
Yep.
The pain in the ass with one of these is you got to keep filling it. You got to keep filling it, and then sometimes these little things go bad. I think I've bought about 5 of these. They do make better quality ones than they did way back when. These kinds of torches are great to start out with because you're not making massive pieces. Some of these necklaces that I make, I mean, the back plate is huge, so I blow through, what I mean? But to start out, perfect.
Right. So low cost, because I know you can move up to, a bigger torch setup, which maybe we cover at a later time.
Yeah.
Can you, polishing, Ashy was asking about polishing options. We're going to be picking that up later. That's probably next week. You're going to be talking about polishing.
Polishing, I mean, if we can get through that this next week,
Yeah,
great.
we'll see.
If it's
We
an
got
expert-
a lot of content, guys. We may have 3 weeks
Yeah.
of like, this is drill down. We're giving you guys as much data as we can. So this should be able to help all of you. Once it's also up on YouTube, it could be your go-to guide to how do I get started and start doing this. So we'll pick that up on that. Best way to dispose of pickle. Can you put it down the sink?
I do. My laundry sink, in my laundry room. I'm not putting it down with all my dishes and stuff. But again, you got to know what you're using. You don't want to be dumping toxic stuff down your drain.
Right. Yeah, it depends on what your pickles.
Yeah, if you're using citric acid, or if you're using the pH down from a swimming pool, those you just dilute them and dump them. They're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it has other stuff in it, then you'd have to look at the content and see, whether it's safe to dispose of that way.
Yeah. And I think we covered the saw blades. We talked about the saw blades there. Hey, changing the blades, is that pretty easy? Somebody was asking, Kelly was asking, hey, is that hard to change the blade on the saw? I mean, you did it pretty fast.
On this one, on the German one, it's super easy. You just stick it, you just dial the things and you open up the little things and you put the blade in there. This one was a little trickier. I'm not going to lie. I had to learn. I'm fast at it now. It took me 10 minutes to learn how to do it, but yeah, it's way easier. It's not scary.
Yep. All right. Then a couple other questions here. Which situation is best for wire solder? And this really kind of taps into like the sheet solder as well, like application areas where to use wire versus sheet.
Well, sometimes when I'm making stuff and embellishments around, I like to take my squeezers with a long thing of wire solder, and I've got my torch in one hand, and you can do it. That takes a lot of practice. You're probably not going to be doing that right out of the gate, but the sheet solder that you can cut into little pieces of squares, I like to use those for underneath when I'm soldering my bezel shut. I like to use those when I'm squishing them in between balls that I need to solder together. But the wire solder, I like using that for when I'm putting my bezel down on my back plate, because it contours in that little crevice just right. So
that's great.
Yeah, and again, it's preference. People don't even buy wire solder. I don't know how people live without it, but a lot of smiths just do pallions.
Right. I mean, and that comes to the techniques. I mean, what we want to cover here is really what can help you for both the people who are seasoned doing this, but also people that are new, giving you a lot of really good value and information. This has been terrific, Erika.
I just wish we could go faster. It's just learning this stuff is not, especially for beginners. It's not. There's so many things to cover, and you can't just do it in an hour. It's impossible.
Right. So I think we talked about that pre-cut, different options for polishing. We'll talk. One last question here was butane versus propane, one versus the other.
Okay, so this is,
That's MAP.
That's MAP gas.
Yeah, these little guys are butane. You buy just the little butane things. I use acetylene and oxygen now, but it took me a while to get the courage to go from this to my smith. It's a little scary, and I've encouraged other smiths, like, you can do it, man, you can do it. It's not that scary, because once you start using it for a day, you'll realize the power in a big torch. But still, you can do everything with one of these. It just takes you a little longer, and it's safer, and it's a good place to start. I wouldn't necessarily get this brand, because like I said, I've had to buy like 10 of them because they always crap out. Spend the money and get like the $60 good one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Well, I think that's really hit most of our questions. Some of the ones we'll be picking up when we get into the polishing stuff here. Any other pieces that the two of you guys
let's throw that there was another question I saw on getting the link to the videos for people that want to go back and see anything from any of our series. Let's throw that back up. And then I encourage everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps promote all of the content so more people can find us and be able to watch these videos and learn and advance the lapidary arts.
Yep. And one of the things that I would ask here, we'll maybe put this up, if you like what you're seeing, like if this is adding value to you, give us a positive review, give us a 5-star review on Google, because that helps us. As we're doing this, we put a lot of effort in, to find people, put the video edit and that. So if this gives you value, if you're liking what you're learning, give us a 5-star review. That's certainly something that we really appreciate. And definitely sign up for the YouTube videos, because then you'll be alerted when those videos come up. Subscribe to the YouTube channel.
And also, I'm on Instagram. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook. I'm just not a Facebooker. I'm more of an Instagrammer, but I answer questions all the time. So if you have a question, don't feel like it's stupid and go ahead and ask me. You just
and you right in front of you, you'll see we've got the QR code you can scan, or you can just type in the things. Also, Erika's on TikTok as well. And then of course her website's over there as well. But I think you said most of everything you're doing is really on mostly Instagram.
Correct. Yep.
Well, I tell you, we really appreciate you being here. Why don't we pop back to the main screen? We really appreciate you taking the time. I know you've worked really hard and you've got a huge amount of videos and all kinds of great stuff. So we are super stoked. Like, I'm learning this stuff because I've been saying to my daughter, like, I want to go learn how to silversmith. And so here you on here. So believe me, I'm taking notes as well as to what I'm learning about things. The simple thing around the solder was like a huge breakthrough for me. Like, I had no idea. I've seen it easy. I've seen that, but I thought, well, that's just easy, as opposed to, oh, it's a softer, different melting points.
It's easy. It's easy, sure.
Super.
It's
super
easy.
good.
So let's use that for everything because it's easier, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's confusing. The name
and then it's
is
all
kind of
melting on
confusing.
you.
So yeah,
all right,
Erika, thanks a ton for all your time and helping us prepare all these videos. And for everybody that's here right now, there's so much more coming. We saw maybe a third of what we have put together for this. So we'll see you all next week. And probably there will be a part 3 because I think we're going to have too much content to cover it all next week. So we'll see, but lots more great content to come.
And hopefully we'll get the glitchiness figured out.
Yeah, we're going to try to figure out how to make it a little bit smoother.
Yeah.
So I know Mark is thinking about that right now.
Same time next week.
Same time.
Awesome. Friday night.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Wow, tonight is fire. This is just the first part of this series and everybody is all pumped. That's massive learning for just an hour. And thank you so much, Erika. And we know there's more for the second series next week, that's for sure. And that's being said, thank you so much again for your time tonight. See you next week. Have a good night.